He appeared already to know much about them and all their families, and indeed to know much about all of the history and doings of the Shire, down from days hardly remembered among the hobbits themselves. It no longer surprised them, but he made no secret that he owed his recent knowledge largely to Farmer Maggot, whom he seemed to regard as a person of more importance than they had imagined. There's earth under his old feet and clay on his fingers, wisdom in his bones, and both his eyes are open, said Tom. It was also clear that Tom had dealings with the elves, and it seemed that in some fashion news had reached him from Gildor concerning the flight of Frodo.
So we know from that writing that Tom seemed to have a friendly relationship with Farmer Maggot, and he had some contact with elves as well. But what really interests me is his connection with Farmer Maggot.
Because we know that Maggot is a good guy, but living on the borderlands, he tends to be on his guard for strange travelers and goings-on, just like he was with the Black Riders. So I'm dying to know what he thought of Tom Bombadil.
Obviously, I don't think that Maggot would be afraid of Tom, but hobbits do have a knack for noticing things out of the ordinary.
Just like how they got very suspicious of Bilbo and Frodo for never aging, you would think that at some point Maggot would notice that Tom never really ages himself. Maybe hobbits don't understand the lifespans of men. We know they tend to shy away from the big people, so this would be a reasonable explanation. But what about the fact that he sings all the time? Maybe he just thought Tom was an oddball and left it at that? But did he ever see Tom use his power? I like to think that one might stick with him as a bit different.
It's difficult to say, but using some clues from Tolkien, we can make some guesses. It definitely seems like Tom and Maggot were more friends than just neighborly acquaintances.
He made no secret that he owed his recent knowledge largely to Farmer Maggot, whom he seemed to regard as a person of more importance than they had imagined. There's earth under his old feet and clay on his fingers, wisdom in his bones, and both his eyes are open, said Tom. A lot of people speculate on why Tom viewed Maggot as someone of higher importance than most thought, but I think the answer is pretty clear. To me, it makes perfect sense that Tom Bombadil would have a lot of respect for a farmer. Tom is deeply connected to nature and the land, living a carefree life that's in harmony with the world around him. A farmer, like Farmer Maggot, shares that bond with the earth, working the land and tending to it. Tom values simplicity, and there's a kind of wisdom in the steady, humble work of farming, which makes it easy to see why Tom would hold him in high regard.
And just like Tom, Maggot is someone who has put down roots in a specific place of the world and doesn't intend on moving.
This actually plays in very nicely with Gandalf's quote about Tom Bombadil towards the end of the story. But if you would know, I'm turning aside soon. I'm going to have a long talk with Bombadil, such a talk as I've not had in all my time. He is a moss gatherer, and I've been a stone doomed to rolling. But my rolling days are ending, and now we shall have much to say to one another. I think Farmer Maggot would also fit the definition of a moss gatherer. So when we take a step back, we see that Tom gets a lot of his news from Maggot, he has a lot of respect for him and his work, they live close to each other, and they share similar purposes in life. So I think it's reasonable to assume that they knew each other pretty well.
Which makes me want to know even more about their dynamic together. Maybe if you asked him about Tom, Maggot would say something like this.
Tom Bombadil? Oh, he's a strange one, that fella. Lives near the old forest, doesn't bother anyone, and doesn't seem to age a day. Been around as long as anyone can remember, always singing his silly little tunes. He knows the woods like the back of his hand, though. I've never seen anyone else who can walk through the old forest like he does and not get into trouble. Old Tom's got a bit of a way with the land, I'll say that. Now don't go asking me what he's up to or where he came from. No one knows, and to be honest, I don't think he'd tell you even if you did ask. Seems like he's got his own sort of magic, but it's not the kind you can figure out with a bit of studying or wizardry. I'll be honest, I'm not sure how he does it, but I'm not one to question what works. Best to let Tom be Tom.
I really like this approach because it depicts Maggot as the kind of neighbor who just minds his own business and doesn't really get involved with other people's issues, and I think that fits well with his character in the books. Now, there is specific writing from Tolkien that shows the friendship and bond between Maggot and Tom Bombadil, but please bear with me. It comes from the book The Adventures of Tom Bombadil, and it is very difficult to recite.
Tom stumped along the road as the light was failing. Rushy lamps gleamed ahead, he heard a voice him hailing. Whoa there, ponies stopped, wheels halted sliding. Tom went plodding past, never looked beside him. Ho there, beggar man, tramping in the marish. What's your business here? Hat all stuck with arrows? Someone's warned you off, caught you at your sneaking? Come here, tell me now what it is you're seeking. Shire ale, I'll be bound, though you've not a penny. I'll bid them lock the doors, and then you won't get any. Well, well, muddy feet, from one that's late for meeting, away back from the mite, that's a surly greeting. You old farmer fat that cannot walk for wheezing, cart drawn like a sack ought to be more pleasing. Penny wise, tub on legs, a beggar can't be chooser. or else I bid you go, and you would be the loser. Come, Maggot, help me up, a tankard now you owe me. Even in cockshut light, an old friend should know me. Laughing they drove away, and Rushy never halting. Though the inn open stood, and they could smell the malting, they turned down Maggot's lane, rattling and bumping, Tom in the farmer's cart, dancing round and jumping. Stars shone on Bamfurlong, and Maggot's house was lighted. Fire in the kitchen burned to welcome the benighted. Maggot's sons bowed at the door, his daughters did the curtsy, his wife brought tankards out for those who might be thirsty.
If you had trouble following that, let me summarize it for you.
As Tom Bombadil walks along the road in the early evening, he's called out to by Farmer Maggot, who's riding by in his cart. Maggot teases him about his appearance, especially his hat stuck with arrows. He jokingly accuses Tom of being a beggar, and Tom responds with playful banter, calling Maggot names and mentioning his own weariness. Despite the teasing, Tom asks for a drink, and Maggot, in good humor, offers him a ride in his cart. They travel together down the road, and when they reach Maggot's house, the family welcomes them warmly, the fire is lit, and drinks and food are served. I think this is such an awesome window into the friendship between Bombadil and Farmer Maggot. It's also very relatable and makes readers look at Bombadil in a new way. Yes, he may be some mythical ancient being with incredible power, but he's also just like a regular dude. He enjoys joking around with friends and grabbing a drink every now and then. In my head, Tom Bombadil and Farmer Maggot are essentially best friends. They share similar interests and enjoy spending time together. But there are other residents of the area besides Maggot. The Bucklanders live just across the Brandywine River and much closer to the Old Forest and Tom Bombadil than even Farmer Maggot. So did they know about Tom? And if they did, what did they think of him? We actually can let Tolkien answer this one himself. This passage comes from his book, The Adventures of Tom Bombadil. They also show that the Bucklanders knew Bombadil, though no doubt they had little understanding of his powers as the Shire folk had of Gandalf's. Both were regarded as benevolent persons, mysterious maybe, and unpredictable, but nonetheless comic. So it's canon that the hobbits in the area knew Bombadil and were on pretty friendly terms with him.
Although in The Adventures of Tom Bombadil, there is a part where the hobbits of Buckland seem to not really know who he is at first, and they shoot arrows into his hat, but that seems to be chalked up as more of a misunderstanding or kind of a prank on Tom than anything sinister.
I think it's really fascinating that we get to see other characters interacting with Tom and living alongside him. And it's funny how the hobbits nearby just seem to view him as a neighbor instead of this mysterious ancient being. And maybe that's why Tom chose to live around hobbits, because they don't ask big questions or try to figure him out. They're simple folk, content with what's right in front of them, and that's probably exactly what Tom wants. To live peacefully without anyone digging in too deep into who or what he really is. And the hobbit lifestyle seems to align more with Tom Bombadil's personality than any other peoples of Middle-earth. Now, when you think of hobbits, you might picture cozy homes, lots of food, and quiet, peaceful living. But what if I told you their society is actually more forward-thinking than you might expect? Let's dive in and break it down. First, let's talk about leadership. When most people think of powerful rulers in Middle-earth, they probably think of elves, dwarves, men, kings, queens, monarchs ruling with centuries-old bloodlines. But hobbits appear to have a more democratic system than all of them. In Hobbit society, the mayor of the Shire isn't some monarch or hereditary ruler. The mayor is elected by the people of the Shire. Every 7 years, hobbits vote to choose their leader. And while the mayor's role might seem ceremonial, this election system is a huge contrast to the dynastic monarchies of the other races. Meanwhile, take a look at elves, men, and dwarves. They operate on a system where leadership is passed down through bloodlines. Whether it's Aragorn in Gondor, Thranduil in Mirkwood, or Dane Ironfoot in Erebor, leadership in these societies is typically inherited, not elected. So right off the bat, hobbits seem to have a more democratic approach to governing their people. Now let's get into something that's pretty unique to hobbits, their legal system. Hobbits love a good contract. In fact, their legal system relies heavily on written agreements, especially when it comes to property, inheritance, and trade. Take Bilbo Baggins, for example. He didn't just leave behind his belongings for his relatives to fight over. No, he had a will that laid out exactly what would happen to his property. That's not something you see a lot in Middle-earth. Hobbits take contracts seriously, and they abide by them. It's part of their orderly and predictable society. Compare that to elves, men, and dwarves. Sure, they have laws, but their societies are more informal when it comes to transactions. In places like Gondor or Mirkwood, deals might be struck, but they're not usually set down in legal documents or contracts. A lot of it is based on personal trust or the will of the ruler. It's a more feudal system rather than one based on formal written agreements. One of the most striking things about Hobbit society is its unwavering peacefulness. While the rest of Middle-earth is often embroiled in war and conflict, the Shire stands out as a land where peace is not just a temporary lull between battles, it's a way of life. For centuries, the Hobbits have managed to keep their world free from the chaos that plagues the larger realms. Unlike the elves who have faced countless wars with Morgoth and Sauron, or the men of Gondor and Rohan who are always preparing for battle, Hobbits live a life free of the fear of war. This focus on peace has allowed them to cultivate a stable society where their greatest concerns are things like planting the best crops or making sure their pipes are well stocked. And this isn't just about avoiding war. Hobbits place a high value on personal peace. The Shire is full of small, tight-knit communities where everyone knows each other. There's a certain calmness in their daily routines, enjoying simple pleasures like eating, chatting with neighbors, or working the land. Their focus on peace in their day-to-day lives creates a calm, orderly society, which allows for a kind of stability that many other races in Middle-earth can only dream of. Think about it, hobbits have no interest in power struggles, conquest, or expanding their borders. Their idea of a conflict is the occasional dispute over land ownership or who should inherit a particular piece of property. This peaceful nature doesn't just keep the Shire safe, it's an essential part of what makes the Hobbit society work. Without the threat of war or conflict, Hobbits can focus on sustainable living, community building, and the small yet significant details of everyday life. Which leads us to environmental stewardship and love of nature. Another incredible aspect of Hobbit society is their deep connection to the land. Hobbits are not just farmers, they are stewards of the environment. Their love for nature is reflected in every aspect of their lives, from the way they cultivate the land to their overall respect for the environment. They've created a way of life that revolves around sustainability, living in harmony with nature rather than exploiting it. In contrast, other races in Middle-earth often see nature as something to conquer or exploit. The dwarves mine deep into the earth, extracting precious resources, and men are constantly engaged in war or empire expansion, often damaging the landscape in the process. And when we think about wealth in the Shire, it's important to remember that even the families with less still live incredibly comfortable and peaceful lives. The Shire, as a whole, is a place of abundance, where most hobbits, regardless of their economic standing, enjoy a lifestyle that's marked by simplicity and contentment. Take families like the Gamgees, for instance. While Samwise's family isn't wealthy in the same way the Bagginses or the Tooks are, they still live in a beautiful home with a lovely garden, and they have more than enough to get by. Sam's father, the Gaffer, works hard as a gardener for the Baggins family, and even without great wealth, the Gamgees lead a peaceful, comfortable life. One of the most defining and advanced aspects of Hobbit society is the way they've built such tight-knit communities. Everyone knows everyone, and that connection goes beyond just living in the same area. The Hobbits have created a culture where being part of a close, tight-knit community is essential for personal well-being. In the Shire, no one is isolated. There's a real sense of interdependence. People help one another, share what they have, and look out for each other. This kind of mutual care fosters a sense of belonging that is often missing in other cultures, like our own. Imagine how comforting it must be to know that no matter what happens, your neighbors are there to support you. Now let's take a step back for a moment and consider how the Shire's way of life might compare to some of the happiest places in the real world. It's not always about the wealth that you have, but the quality of the life that you lead. We've all heard of countries where happiness is high, like Nordic countries, places like Denmark, Finland, and Norway, where people have a great work-life balance, strong community ties, and a deep connection to nature. These countries often rank at the top of the global happiness indexes, and it's not because they have the most money, they don't even have the highest income levels in the world. What they do have is a strong sense of community, a culture of cooperation, and a deep respect for nature and personal well-being. Their societies focus on things like access to nature, work-life balance, and social support, which makes people feel secure, content, and connected. Similarly, in places like the Netherlands, there's a high emphasis on community living and quality over quantity. It's about having time to spend with family and friends, access to green spaces, and a lifestyle that values simplicity and sustainability over consumerism. In fact, research shows that people in these countries often prioritize connection over material wealth, and that they live in ways that foster personal happiness and collective well-being. Now let's bring this back to the Shire. Like these real-world examples, Hobbit society thrives not on material wealth, but on simple pleasures. Good food, good company, and a life that's centered around community and nature. Hobbits don't need grand palaces like Minas Tirith or the sprawling riches of Erebor to live happy lives. Instead, they focus on balance, family, and the joys of everyday living. And that's what makes their society so appealing. So when we think about the hobbits and their society, maybe it's not all that surprising that they live the way they do. The true wealth of the Shire is in its values, and maybe, just maybe, that's something we can all learn from. After all, happiness doesn't always come from having more. Sometimes it's about making the most of what you've got. Of course, this is just my opinion, but I think the Hobbit's approach to governance and society is incredibly forward-thinking compared to the monarchies and bloodline-based leadership seen in elves, men, and dwarves. So let me know what you think. Drop your thoughts in the comments below, and don't forget to like and subscribe for more deep dives into Middle-earth. Thank you all for watching. More videos coming soon, so I'll catch you later. Bye.